caves and caverns, where adventurers go deep into the unknown to face death and danger. Home of vampires. Strange weapons and weird creatures. Hidden and forgotten. Unspeakable horrors that make even the bravest man faint with terror. Demons and cults, dancing in the flames of the abyss, looking for new souls to take. And of course, the occasional cyber gorilla. Welcome to the Forbidden Craftacomb. My name is Juan Machuca, Mexican crafting DM. On today's broken English tutorial, we will build modular cavern tiles. We will explain the basic pieces to start your own basic set. If you haven't watched the last episode about dungeon tiles, there I show you the measurements we are using for our system. So let's begin. Here you can see me with our main build material Vynil floor tiles with sticky backside. I have already pasted a piece of black EVA foam on the back and trimmed the excess. I have already also marked our basic 6x6 cm square tiles that will be used in our build. Using these measurements we get 25 squares by piece. We are using 4 vinyl tiles, so we will have easily 100 pieces to work with our project. Here we are cutting all of our pieces with just scissors. These are very easy to cut, and thanks to this it means we don't have to have a great pause using a hobby knife to cut perfect squares or have a hard time trying to cut big chunks of styrofoam without having special tools. Here I'm showing how all the squares fit together in a grid. Thankfully we didn't have trouble cutting mostly perfect squares, but we are building a cave system here and nature rarely has straight lines. What we are trying to do is make those pieces fit into a modular system that maintains a grid even if we add curves and jagged walls to our tiles. So we have to identify what pieces we want and classify them according to our needs. Here I'm drawing a jagged cave wall to represent the rocky wall of the cave. The key detail here that you need to pay attention is that all the corners stay at the same measure, 6 cm. All the lines I'm drawing end at the corners of the cave tile. Here I have arranged and marked all the pieces that I will be using for our system. A basic square tile, a curved tile, a diagonal tile, we can get 2 pieces with 1 square, a jagged wall, a jagged corridor. As you can see in this demonstration, if we maintain the corners at the same measure, the pieces can connect and remain modular. We can draw and cut whatever we want as long as the corners touch. The next pieces I like to make them in smaller quantities because they are used only in special cases. However, feel free to create as many as you need if you feel you need more. Here we have 4 3x3 small squares, a 6x3 small rectangle, 4 small curved squares, 8 small diagonal squares, 2 6x3 small corridors at your right, and 4 small corridors. As you can see marked in the red circle, I have decided to save the scrap of the curved tile to have another rocky cave corner. Here we have all the pieces cut and ready to add more details. In this demonstration, you can see how all the pieces fit together. The walls look like a rocky cave and the basic square tiles give us more area to make our caverns bigger. Next, we will add EVA foam squares to add more detail to the surface. Because these are caverns, you don't necessarily need to fill them with perfect squares. Using all types of shapes and the negative space of the tile, you can maintain the illusion of a grid in your pieces. Next, I'll show you how I fill some of the cavern tiles with different foam pieces to add a variety to the cavern floor. I grab the hot glue gun and start adding squares. First, a basic 4 foam square piece. Remember that you can remove the corners of these squares and make them imperfect to make it look more natural. The next piece is the same, but this time I will just add 3 squares. In the next piece, I'm using a longer foam shape that will mark 2 spaces in our cavern tiles. Use the shapes that you feel will give variety to the rocky floor, but remember that it needs to be clear to your players how many movement spaces the piece has. In this case, 4 movement spaces. On the next one, I added an additional foam square on top of another foam piece to give the piece more dimension. I usually just add 2 or 3 levels to the pieces. If you are worried that your scattered terrain might be wobbly once you put it on top of the tiles, create pieces without this feature. Here is another one with 3 levels of foam squares. Remembering a question from a subscriber, I decided to mix some resin and turquoise paint to make tiles with small water pools. Just stack some EVA foam, seal all the gaps with hot glue and fill it with resin. Here you can see that the resin has cured in all of our different small water kite pool tiles. If I can give some advice, I added a little too much paint so I lost some of the transparency with the resin. I would recommend to add just a little bit to have transparent water. In case you don't have resin, you can try the next alternative method. Just fill the small pools with hot glue and later paint them with turquoise paint and add gloss varnish. And here we have all of our pieces ready to paint, but I think I'm going to add a little more detail to the water grotto pools before painting. The next step is optional, but it adds a little more personality to our terrain, and I would recommend it. I'll grab a pack of Plastiloca epoxy putty. From what I heard about green stuff epoxy, it works pretty much the same. With this, I'll add details to my pools, like mineral formations around the water. I'll just grab small pieces and mix them. Stick them to the pools with my sculpting tools. I'll add details poking them to give it a rough texture, even opening some holes on the epoxy to see the resin water underneath. Warning, if you have trypophobia, it may look a little disgusting. And here we have all of our pools with the epoxy hard and ready to paint. I'll grab some acrylic paint and start painting the base color of all of our pieces in black. I would recommend to buy black vinyl floor tiles to skip this step and start adding the main color of the rock texture. I usually don't wear gloves when I'm painting, and as you can prove watching my table, this will start to get messy pretty soon. We keep painting and painting and painting and painting and painting and painting until we finish. Here we have all the pieces painted in black and ready to paint the rock texture. I want my Cavern tiles to have brownish yellow ochre look that will contrast with the watercolor, so I'll mix the following colors: some yellow, chestnut, and dark brown. I don't mix the colors completely, the variation of colors will give the pieces a more natural look. In nature we see slight variations of colors in rock surfaces, so leaving the paint like this will help us achieve this effect. You can change the mixture if you want, adding more red, green, gray, or other colors in different quantities. Okay, once we have our paint mix, we start stippling the paint with a brush. If you have a sponge, go ahead, as it also gives a natural texture. The different levels of the EVA foam will add shadows and depth to the surface, making it look like a rocky floor. Avoid painting the mineral formations near the water pools, we will paint them later. Repeat the process with all the pieces. Keep painting and painting and painting. Once we have all the pieces painted, we will begin adding highlights to the rock texture and the corners. As you can see here, I am experimenting with different paint mixtures until I achieve a more clear color mixture to apply to the surface of the tiles. At the end, I didn't like the skin-like color of the mixture, so I added a little more yellow ochre. Once I feel the painting looks good enough, I'll paint the mixture to all of the tiles in the same way. On a side note, when we are building dungeon tiles, cavern tiles, or whatever for our games, one of the main concerns is, am I building enough? The problem starts when you need to make a lot of pieces and the whole process becomes increasingly long for just a small batch of terrain. That's the reason I use this material. It is very fast to create enough durable pieces to build a mega dungeon in case you want one. After this, I will mix another final color for the rock highlights and paint all the corners of the rocks and tiles. I'll clean the brush to make use of the dry brush technique and paint just the raised surfaces of our EVA foam and the tile. I'll repeat this technique to all of the pieces. For the mineral formations, I'll mix some yellow and white to create a cream color and paint them all. I'll use a small paintbrush to paint all the details without touching the resin. I just love how all those cavities look on the water. It makes it look very organic. For the water pool tiles that were filled with hot glue, we'll use the turquoise paint and paint off top of the hot glue that I previously painted with white paint. We'll add some white bubble dots. And finish with a clear gloss varnish. I'll mix a brown wash to paint out the mineral formations and let out the texture pop even more. After that, I just dry brush with cream color again and all the mineral formations are done. Finally, I'll just tint my black paint again and I will draw some cracks on the floor to add the final details. I draw cracks on the ground of the cavern tile with a small brush. I make the shelves around the EVA foam deeper, painting around them. And I also add some cracks in the foam shapes. With this, our cavern tiles are ready. And here it is, the full set of cavern tiles with more than 175 pieces, including small squares. This took probably a week to make and I'm very happy with how they came out. The details on the floor, the water grotto tiles, the color of the water. I'm looking forward to make more and make the cavern even bigger. Now on a final note, I'm not saying this is the definitive guide for cavern tiles or this is the best method. These materials work for me, but don't be discouraged to try using different materials that may suit your necessities better. Use cardboard, foam board, or anything else. Experiment. On future videos, I'll show you quick guides to build scattered terrain for your caves like the ones I'm showing on the video. But first, what happens when dungeon tiles aren't enough? On the next episode, we will see how to build battle mats.